You guys mentioned that I did this like some time ago, so this is a second repeat for this particular clinic. I start out with this clinic by saying, you know, the internet can be really helpful and really useful. Sometimes it's a pain, but sometimes it's really useful. Because when I first started putting this clinic together, I was looking for a picture illustrating what consisting is, and this is what I found. Isn't that a great picture? I love that picture.
You get 5?
It's more, it's
15.
like 12 or something. I'm not sure how many it is. But speed matching and consisting allows you to run your locomotives together, powered locomotives together. And we'll start out with a brief definition. Well, first of all, I'll say this is a very basic clinic. I mean, 10 years ago, this was a great clinic because people were still getting into DCC. But now that it's 2025, you know, you've probably had some experience with speed matching and trying to get your locomotives to run together. But so this is very basic information. And hopefully, after putting this together and thinking about it a little bit, I can give you a different perspective on a couple of points about this. The other thing to note in this clinic, I use a Digitrax system. We have Digitrax over in the depot. I know Sandy uses NCE, right? So everything I talk about here regarding the throttles is Digitrax. Digitrax does their throttles a little bit different from everybody else, so that's why. So if there's a question, and I may ask you to sort of explain how the NCE throttles work, because I have never used one. Okay. First thing, we're going to just give a brief definition of what each is. Speed matching is the process of adjusting a locomotive's output voltage so that the locomotive runs at the same speed as other locomotives in the consist across the entire range of the throttle settings. So you want the locomotives to run the same speed regardless of the throttle setting. Consisting is the process of linking the locomotives together via their addresses so that they both respond to throttle commands. So that's just a basic definition of what we're going to be talking about. So first we're going to talk about speed matching. And there are two basic ways to adjust the decoder motor voltage for speed. The first is called basic speed control. It uses CVs 2, 5, and 6. And CV2 is the start motor voltage. In other words, it's the low end of the range. CV5 is the maximum, that's the high end. And then CV6 V mid is the mid-range in the middle. Some of the older brands of decoders do not use CVs 5 and or 6. So you have to know your decoder and what it has in it. Most all of the new decoders in the past, say 5, 10 years, all use these three settings. But I know the Tsunami 2s do, and the new ESU lock sound uses all three. Digitrax has always used those three, but the earlier Tsunamis and the QSI decoders don't use some of those CVs. So you have to be knowledgeable about which CVs your decoder supports. If you do have a, say, older Tsunami decoder, you can use a speed table control. This uses CVs 67 through 94 to make fine adjustments to your speed settings. And in order to change between the two, you have to change CV29. Now, if you use Decoder Pro, it's real easy because it has a basic speed tab and then a speed table tab, and you select between them. And whichever one you select, that automatically changes CV29. A couple of things to note about speed matching. Excuse me.
One question.
Sure.
Do these CVs apply to all brands of locomotives?
Yes. CV29 is every brand of decoder.
That's right.
Is in every brand of decoder. It's your basic setup for the configuration of the decoder.
Standard across all decoders.
Right, but like I said, when you're talking about basic speed control, where's my arrow? These three,
Yeah.
some decoders don't have these two
Yeah.
CVs. All decoders do have this one. And in fact,
But the speed table, they're always 60.
you can always select basic or speed table
Okay.
in all brands of decoders. I've never run across one that was limited.
Okay.
So you always have a choice. Okay. When you're getting ready to speed match, you may or may not need to make any adjustments. It depends on the age and the type of decoder and the locomotive. For example, two locomotives from the same manufacturer, from the same production run, the chances are really good they'll run together right out of the box. But they may not run at the speed you want them to. A locomotive may run noticeably different when operated in the different directions. You can use CV66 Ford trim or 95 reverse trim to make setting corrections. But those two CVs generally are only enabled when using the speed table. I know with the newer lock sound decoders that those two CVs are enabled even for the basic settings. So you can adjust the forward speed and reverse speed a little bit if they're different using those two trim CVs. And your momentum settings will impact how easy it is to speed match locomotives. So before you start, you want to set CVs 3 and 4 to 0. That way you know when you set the throttle setting for your locomotive, when it starts, that's the speed that it's going at. With momentum, it takes a few seconds for your locomotive to get to the speed that it's set at. That's why you set those to 0. That just saves you a little bit of time, because once you set it, if your momentum is at 0, once you set it to a speed, it's going at that speed that it's going to go at.
Is that something you have to keep it at 0?
No.
Okay, so
You're just doing this for the speed matching process.
Okay.
But once you get it set where you want it, you can add momentum back in.
Okay. Thanks.
So, yeah. Okay. Speed matching process. There's two ways to do it. The first way is what I call the hard way. This is where you put a locomotive on the track and you say, okay, this is going to be the one I like, how it runs. I want to match every other locomotive to that. And you adjust as you change the throttle. That's kind of what I call the trial and error method. The way I do it, which I found is the easiest way to do it, is to use a speedometer. So you would have to buy a speedometer, and I've got information about that later on. So, but this is the one I use. It's really neat. It sets right on the track, and you run your locomotive through it. It tells you how fast it's going. Very simple. Okay, so using this method with the speedometer, first thing you want to do is figure out how fast you want your locomotives to go. I use the following target speeds. I use for throttle setting 1. I'm looking for 3 scale miles per hour. For throttle setting 50, right in the middle, 33 scale miles per hour. And then for throttle setting 99, 63 scale miles per hour. I have a reason for selecting those, and I'll show those. I'll explain that a little bit when I show you the graph about that, but there's a reason behind all that. So I've designed my speed curve how I want my locomotives to travel down the track for all settings. You may not want these. You may want other different speed curve or whatever. It's up to you. It's however you want to design your locomotives, how you want them to run. That's just what I found to be easiest for me. Okay. Next, put the locomotive on the programming track, and you'll set CVs 3 and 4 to 0 to make the speed matching easy. And while it's on the programming track, it's a good idea to go ahead and use Decoder Pro and record what settings you have. That way you'll know this is my starting point, and as I make changes, what kind of changes or do I see based on the changes I make? How does things change? That way you have a record of where I was and where I'm going. Okay, next thing you want to do is you'll put the locomotive on the track and run the locomotive at throttle setting 1 through the speedometer. That gives you your slow speed setting, and you can use ops mode programming to change CV2 to run faster or slower or according to your desired starting speed. And then you run it back and forth, forward and reverse through the speedometer to see how if there's a real difference. So what you're doing is you're setting CV2 to what your desired starting speed is. Next, you do the same step, except you'll do it at the high end. You use it, and you're making the changes at the high end using CV5. You figure out what your speed is that you want, run it at throttle setting 99 on the Detrex throttle, find out how fast it's going. If it's going too fast, you change CV5 to make it run slower until you get it to the speed that you want.
But you leave,
Yeah.
you leave the knob up.
You leave the knob
Right.
at 99, and then you change the CV, and it'll change the speed. Alternately, you can do like I do. I like to set it back to 0, change the CV, and then go back up to 99. You can do it either way. And then you'll do it for the middle speed setting using CV6. Okay? Okay? And once you think you've got all 3 settings where you want them, what I like to do is do an overall check one last time. Using the speedometer, I record at throttle settings 1, 25, 50, 75, and 95, just to verify the speed curve that you have. Make sure that you're running at your locomotives at the speed that you want them to. And one of the things I do is when I do that for a locomotive, I'll record those settings in a spreadsheet. That way I'll know what CV settings give me what speeds. And I've got a copy of that here in just a second. And if everything is working out like you want it to, you're done. You can go back and change CVs 3 and 4 and put whatever momentum in that you'd like. Okay, so this is my target speed curve. This is what I want my locomotives to run at. Here are the throttle settings, 1, 25, 50, 75, 99. And here are your speed settings. And you'll notice that there's a 15 scale miles per hour difference between these settings so that it becomes a straight line. I like having a straight line setting for my speed settings. Okay. And by the way, the reason I pick 3, where's my pointer? Pick 3 as the starting speed. I found that different locomotives and decoder combinations, you can't always get, let's say, a speed setting of 1 at the low end with different combinations of locomotives, and I found that 3 is a pretty good reference point for all combinations of locomotives and decoders. The new locomotives that are out nowadays using lock sound decoders, you can get a speed setting of 1. But if you have an older locomotive with a different decoder, you can't always get that one to run at a speed of 1. So I found that 3 is a generally good setting to get all of them to run together. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. And besides, 3 scale miles per hour in HO scale, that's not going very fast. I mean, that's a good switching speed. If you're into switching, that's a good speed for switching. And at the other end, 63 63 scale miles per hour in HO is pretty fast. If you're into operations like I am, you like to operate in different places, very rarely do you go higher than about 30. Most, you might average, I would say average speed of an operating session is about 20 scale miles per hour, maybe 30. Any faster than that is way too fast. So 63 is a good high-end setting. You can get it consistent across all brands of locomotives and decoders, but you rarely run your trains that fast, unless you're just a speed freak, I guess. I don't just like to do it, I guess.
Kid,
Or a kid, there you go.
if the neighbor's seen your own.
Right, right. So here's a copy of my one of the spreadsheets I have. And here are my locomotives across the top, and here are all the CV settings. And if you look down at the table, look at all the speed settings I was able to get. Pretty consistent across this way, especially at the lower setting. As I said, it would have been very difficult to get a speed setting of 1 at a throttle setting of 1. But over here in the blue is my, quote, golden locomotive, okay? You notice that I was able to get it to set exactly at the settings I want over here. That's this locomotive, so this is kind of my target right here. And if you look closely at the table, you'll see that they're not consistent across the table. It's pretty good on throttle setting 1. Down here in the middle, you get some variation. One of the things I found is at the lower speed setting, you really want it to be really tight. If your target is 3 and you get one running at, say, 2, and you get one running at, say, 4, those two will still run pretty well together, even though there's a little bit of variance. At the lower end, you really want to be plus or minus 1 or 2. At the high end, it doesn't really matter. You can get more variance. So if I'm running one at 63 and another one's running at, say, 67 or even 60, okay? At the high end speed, the variance can be larger. It really doesn't matter. It really doesn't affect how the locomotives run together. It's really more important at the lower end to get it tight.
I have a question.
Sure.
If you find that your 3 engines, let's say, according to your table, and you have one that's pretty close to what you're looking for, and the other 2, right, are a little bit lower and a little bit lower, right? Do you want them, like I said, in that position to follow, or they're all supposed to be equal. If you put a one that responds lower in the front, right, then you're going to wind up with accordion stuff, aren't you?
I find that's not the case. If they're reasonably matched within plus or minus 1 or 2, they're going to run well together regardless of which position they're in the consist.
Right, and also regardless of where they are in the train. In other words, if you've got an engine every,
if you're talking about DPU type of running, we have a little bit more forgiveness if it's in the middle or the end of the train because you got that slack.
right,
Okay.
One thing you need to remember, if you use displaced power and you cross an electrical boundary between zones, you get a derail in the other zone, you lose your whole train.
Yeah.
You get a pile on the floor.
And then there's the reversing loop aspect too. If you've got pusher and lead locomotive, you got to make sure that they don't cross the boundary in a reverse loop at the same time. Okay. So you got to make sure your train length is, right for how long your reverse loop is. So I'm just showing you here that you can actually get it to work to where, regardless of locomotive or decoder, you can get them to run, any of these locomotives will run together very well, pretty well. They may not be exact. There may be a little bit of pushing here and there, but that's okay. You just don't want them to be fighting each other. That's the main thing. If there's a little bit of pushing, that's okay, because they'll run pretty well together, regardless of.
Usually, if I have one that's just a hair faster than the other, I put it in the lead.
Yeah. It's better to pull than to push.
Right.
So. All right. Well, okay. Now you can take all that data and plot it on the graph, and you can visually see how well one locomotive might run against another. In fact, excuse me, if you use, let me go back. This is Excel. You can, if you're good at Excel, you can use this data and plot graphs of all the different locomotives and see, oh, these two are really well matched and these two are not. They're kind of spread out a little bit. So if you're into Excel, you can plot all those different data points on a graph, and it'll show you graphically which ones are, lined up. So. And here's Decoder Pro. This is the page for your basic speed control, and you see the 3 CVs over here on the side and what their values are. And here's where you change CV29, that little radio button. If it's clicked, it'll be set for basic speed control. And the same thing with the speed table, right? And if you click there, it'll automatically change CV29 to let you run speed table. I do have a few of the older Tsunami decoders that only have CV2, so I have to use the speed table to get the high-end adjustment, the middle and the high-end adjustment. And that can be fun to work with. It takes a little bit of time to get those set up correctly, but there is a quick and easy way to get started. As I said, the older Tsunamis do not have CVs 5 and 6, so you have to use the speed table. What you can do is, once you click on the radio button to use the speed table, it pops up another window, and select either use or define speed table, where you define your own curve on using the CVs, or linear speed, which case you can pick a value over here and click on it, click a value over here, click on it, and then click the button match ends, and that creates a straight line. Okay. Program that into your locomotive, see how it runs, and you may need to adjust one end or the other, click match ends again, try it again, see what happens. So that's kind of a quick and dirty way of using the speed table. It makes it a lot easier than trying to program each CV by itself. Okay, what's next? Oh, and if you do buy a speedometer or have one, this is why I like using the speedometer in this method, is because when you buy a new locomotive, you don't have to match it to any other locomotive. You just run it through the speedometer and set it. So you can speed match one locomotive by itself. So whenever you buy a new one, just run it according to your table, type in your data, and there you go. Now, on the other hand, if you're, say, at a club, like the Shoals or Redstone, and you're not sure if 2 locomotives are matched, you can use your speedometer to figure out how well they're matched. Okay, so you put your speedometer on the track, and you run the first locomotive through it, and then wait. It takes about 4 or 5 seconds for the speedometer to reset. So you have to have a distance between your locomotives. Run one through at whatever throttle setting, and run the other one through, and you can see, oh, these are reasonably matched, or they're not. I need to change one and speed match it. So it makes it real easy to determine if 2 locomotives are matched or not. Any questions on all that? I think we're done about speed matching. So
You want to gather or set your data from the bottom up or from the top down? In other words, you want to start with the slow?
I start with the slow,
You start with the slow. and you move
because
to
that's
the fast.
more important, really, I think, than the
Yeah,
fast.
so do I.
Because the slow has to be, like I said, if you're speed matching two locomotives, and one is running at, say, 3, and one is running at, say, 6, you really notice the difference because of the slow speed. But when you get to the high end, if one's running at 63 and one's running at 66, same difference, right? It's not as near as noticeable. So
Oh, yeah, yeah.
I always start on the slow end, then do the high end, and figure out what's going on in the middle. Yes?
Have you ever noticed any power demand speed mismatching in the sense that when you start getting more load on two different engines that have two different kinds of electric motors in them, that they operate at different speeds as they start to load up with current demand? Because I few struggle to get to speed match other than when they're on their own. So when they're on their own, same speed. When I start putting any sort of weight behind them, you end up with one trying to shove the other, or the other one spinning its wheels, pulling its darndest to get ahead.
Are they same brand?
No. They're very different brands.
Yeah, I've seen that from, an example I had with on the speed matching, I bought 4 ABA set of those in and out empties. And the only thing I had to change on those was restart. And I set them on the track about at the foot apart, and just started turning to see which one went first. And until all of them were going at that level, I just went in and adjusted restart, and they tracked, I mean, almost perfectly. And I just set a top end speed, that was it. And I pulled big long trains at the club, and you watch them, they pull pretty evenly.
I haven't really noticed that with the locomotives I have.
Have you ever run them through your speedometer under load with the train behind?
Well, no, I haven't. The load is going to slow them down.
Well, yes, but for matching purposes, you'll see the mismatch, right, more if you run them through with this, let's say, the same load on them, the same number of cars.
Yeah.
That might,
4 FTs don't seem to show any difference.
yeah, well,
They all pull the same
from the same manufacturer.
decoders and same electric motors.
I've had 2 locomotives pulling a train, and the locomotives uncoupled for some reason, and the first one run off ahead of the other one, but that's because the second one is under load, the first one's not. I mean, but if they're coupled, you figure they're both pulling together, right?
Maybe. Stiction could be, if the stiction is good.
Okay. Are there any other questions?
I got one
Sure.
quick question. I have not used CMRI. Do you know of a good website or something with a tutorial on
JMRI.
that?
They have JMRI has a help page.
Yep.
Okay.
On the website. But
My wife got a new laptop, so she gave me her over, and that's what I'm going to use to hook up.
You go on YouTube also. And
Yeah.
type in JMRI tutorial.
when I first started using Decoder Pro, I just went and used it because it's very intuitive.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's very simple to use. It's straightforward. When you open it up,
A few little settings you gotta kind of.
to get it to work, you've got to know about setting your preferences and which COM port you're connected to. But once you get all that set up, Decoder Pro itself is very intuitive. But yeah, there's all kinds of help online.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, change subjects a little bit. Talk about consisting. 3 ways to consist locomotives. The first one's called basic or address consisting. This is the simplest form of multiple unit control. This is just basically where you program each locomotive to the same address. Then we have universal or standard consisting. and that uses the command station to keep track of each locomotive. And then what they call advanced consisting, and this uses CV19 to store the address. The CV, any value other than 0 in CV19 overrides CVs 1 or CV 17 and 18. Your typical standard address, 2-digit address is stored in CV1, a 4-digit address is stored in CV 17 plus 18, and if anything other than 0 is in 19, 19 will override that. Okay. Now, when I was putting this clinic together and thinking about all this, it suddenly dawned on me that whoever is in charge way back when, 20 years ago, putting all this together and coming up with names, they got it backwards. So let's show you this list of consisting corrected according to David, okay? So the first one you have is the basic address. This is very simple. You know, each locomotive has the same address in CV1 or CV 17, 18. The next one in order should be something other than advanced. I don't know why they call this method using CV19 advanced. The word advanced gives you the impression that somehow it's better than all the others. But if you think about it, this, quote, advanced consisting method really ought to be called something like intermediate or basic plus, because if you put CV19 in 2 different locomotives, you've put the same address in 2 different locomotives, okay? So it ought to be second in the list of order because it's really just a advanced, well, that's not the right word I want to use, a slightly better method than the basic address. This is why I would call it basic plus or something like that. The best method that I found is, of course, universal. Maybe it ought to be called advanced consisting because it's the most, as I'll show you later in another slide, couple of slides, you must always use advanced consisting.
Actually, in Digitax, that one is very simple.
Yeah, that's why I'm bringing this up. So this is why I think they kind of got the words out of order, or the order. Because when you read about it, you read basic, universal, advanced, and it really ought to be the other way around. So, and I'll explain why in just a minute. So with basic address consisting, its advantages is very simple. You only use one address slot, and it consists of how many ever locomotives you have are easily transferred to another layout. Disadvantages, when you're using basic consisting, your locomotives have to face the same direction unless you change CV29 in the one that runs in reverse. When you hit a function button, all of the functions operate on all the locomotives because they're all set to the same address. And then to break up the consist, you have to reprogram the address of one or more locomotives. So this method's not real flexible, it's not real easy to use. Next, advanced consisting, which I'm calling intermediate. It has advantages of when you set up the consist, you can change the functionality of the locomotives in the consist. So in other words, if you want the lead locomotive to blow its horn, and that's the only one you want it to blow, you can set it where locomotives 2 and 3, the horns don't blow, using CVs 21 and 22. And in Dakota Pro, it makes it real easy because all you got to do is select, okay, advanced consisting, program the address, and then you'd use check boxes to figure out which locomotive you want to function when you push a function button. And again, for this one, another advantage, you only use one address slot. Consist is easily transferred to another layout. Disadvantages, you can only use a two-digit address in CV19. It's like CV1. You can only use values between 1 and 127. So you have to pick a two-digit number if you're going to use the what they call advanced consisting. Changing the consist for different function effects requires multiple steps. You have to go back and reprogram, basically. I don't know how true this is these days. Some older decoders do not support CV19. I don't think that's true. I think most decoders you find these days will have CV19 in it. But one of the big disadvantages is if you break up the consist, and if you don't change CV19s back to 0, you may forget what address it was programmed to. And if you're like Jacob, who everybody knows, you program CV19 to a different number entirely, and somebody else can't run the locomotives. You know what address? We were at the Redstone Club, and I wanted to run one of the club locomotives, and I put in the address. It didn't work. I put in the last two digits. You know, it was like locomotive 8942. Program in 42, thinking, oh, maybe, you know.
Somebody's using a short.
Yeah, somebody using CV1 or they're using CV19. It didn't run. I said, Jacob, why can't I run this locomotive? I can't get the address run. He said, I used advanced consisting. I said, well, what number did you use? 89. The first two. The big numbers, not the tens and the single digit. So anyway, so yeah, when you break up the consist, you have to make sure you set CV19 to 0. This is one I like. Advantages of command station consisting. The direction of the locomotives can be set individually, and it's easily changed. If you want to, do, what do they call it, elephant style, lighting effects can be triggered individually, and it's easy to add, remove locomotives from the consist. Disadvantages: one address slot is used per locomotive. So if you have like a Digitrack Zephyr and it's got 20 slots, I don't run 20 locomotives at a time on my little layout, but if you're running a larger layout, you could run out of slot space. Sometimes there's a slight lag as commands are sent to each locomotive, but it's usually not a problem unless there's a large number of locomotives out there. And you cannot transfer your consist to another layout because the information is stored in the command station. But using Digitrack is not a problem because you can rebuild your consist real easy in the next layout. Now I keep talking Digitracks. Digitracks, you can get a throttle with one throttle unit with two throttles on it, and you got a right display and a left display. So you can have two locomotives running at the same time from one throttle if you have a DT400 or DT600. And if you want to consist one to the other, there's a button called the MU button. You push MU and then plus, and it consists the left locomotive to the right. To break up the consist, you just push MU and minus, and breaks it up. I'm not sure how NCE does it. How does NCE do command station consist?
It assigns a separate number between 1 and 127, like a consist number. But what you input, you can input the locomotive number when you build the consist. And it doesn't matter what locomotive you pick out of that consist, it'll run all the way. The consist number is basically, from what I'm seeing, an internal thing to NCE. Keep track of what you have. So after putting together 6 ABA sets of F7s, they are different consist numbers, and it'll show you that there is a different consist number, but to access any of them, pick a locomotive, it doesn't matter whether it was the first or the last or even the middle, you punch that in, and you take control of the consist.
It sounds still fairly simple.
It is fairly simple.
Okay.
Which is, I had a chance when I first bought these things years ago
It was at Caboose Hobbies in Denver. And the guy said, here, I got this, and this, and he started showing me where the throttles were, and I could play with any of them. And the one I had the easiest time with was NCE, rather than the Digitrack.
Okay.
And I thought, okay, and that's what I thought.
Now, just so you'll know, with Digitracks, if you want to consist 3 locomotives, it's very easy too. What you'll do is, with your 2 throttles, you'll consist the second locomotive first to the lead locomotive. Lead locomotive is always on the right side. So you consist the second one on the left side to the first. Then you put in the third locomotive number on the left side and consist it again. Then you've got 3 locomotives running together. So it's very simple.
NCE says, take the first, give me the first locomotive number, give me the last locomotive number. Now, what do you want in the middle? And you just keep going through that iterative process until you've got, I don't know, I saw one guy with 6 locomotives.
Okay.
And it was rather simple. When it came time to break it up, I mean, you just started breaking things up. It was relatively easy.
So, when you use each method of consisting, basic consisting, hardly ever use it. The only really concern there is if you have a problem with the number of slots in your command station. Advanced, notice I put it second, but not third, it's second. The best time to use advanced consisting, where you use CV19, is if you've got a set of locomotives that are coupled together in a semi-permanent fashion, like a set of F7s, okay, ABA F7s. That way, you put all 3 of them, have the same address, you run them together all the time. That's the best time to use this, because that way they all have the same address.
Which works in Santa Fe because they actually, earlier in my era, they ran the same number. They alienated them by LABC. So it was 300 LABC.
Yeah.
So
In fact, that's what you see on the models for the Santa Fe. You see, I've got one that's.
You won't see the L, you'll see the C.
Yeah.
But the A and B are B units, boosters.
Universal or command station, use it most of the time. It's just most flexible, easiest to manage. Making changes are very easy. And again, the one disadvantage is that you can't move the consist to a different layout. That's okay, because you can just reprogram it on the new layout. Finally, there's something called combined consisting. This is something that I read about in one article somewhere. I thought it was pretty neat. You can combine universal and advanced consisting to make it easy to add a mid or end train helper set. Okay, so here's your train, and it's going that way, and the first 2 locomotives are advanced consisted together using address whatever X. Okay, and somewhere over on the side you've got a set of helper locomotives on the pocket track, right? They're consisted together using address Y. So what you do is you stop your train and then move your locomotives up to the back of the other one. And when you do that, you use universal consisting and you MU X and Y together. Then you go up the hill or wherever you're going to, and when you get to the stopping point, you break the consist of X and Y, and then you can run your helpers back to where they came from. References. These are the articles I used to put this together, if you want to look these up. Now, where do we buy speedometers? This AccuTrack speedometer, which is real neat, it's getting harder to find. The only place I saw online that you can buy it now is this place called SBS4 DCC. I can't remember, what does SBS stand for? You remember?
Nope.
System, it stands for.
Stands for something.
System back shop. or
Back shop.
Steam back shop.
Steam back.
There you go. Steam back shop,
I think he's a
4DCC.
member of our NMRA group. Yeah, it's Brian Bianco.
This is the only, well, not the only place I found that you could find it. He has it listed on his website if you're interested in buying it. The only problem is, when I verified the address last week or 10 days ago, he was showing out of stock. So you might have to check back a couple of times over the next several weeks.
Have those, hang on to them.
Yeah. There is one other place that you can find it, but I don't recommend buying it because look at the price that they want to sell it for. They are out of stock too. It's a place called DCCtrain.com. It is listed on their website, but they got it really expensive.
Wow.
Yeah. I bought mine for like $78, which is comparable to the SBS4DCC.com.
About a year ago, I found one on Facebook, somebody was selling on Facebook.
Yeah, that's the other good place to look online, eBay or Facebook or something like that. So if we know this guy, we can ask him when they get him in, let us know so we can buy one. So there is one other possibility. TCS sells something called a train speed speedometer. It's only a little bit more than the SBS, about 120 bucks. It's a speedometer also, but it's not like the AccuTrack where you just set it on over the rails. This goes in the track. It comes with two little photocells that you drill holes in the track, and you set them a certain distance apart in the track. And then the wiring connects to a circuit board, which has a digital display which shows the speed. So when your train runs across the first one, that starts the timer on the circuit board. When it hits the second one, it stops the timer and does a calculation and shows the train speed. So that's another possibility.
That's something to almost install in the programming track.
Yeah. Well, you want it to be on your main line because you want the trains to drive at speed. Right. So, or have
You've got a really long program.
Right. A really long programming track. Right. So, yeah, but it works too. And it's reasonably priced. It takes a little bit of work to install, but it's reasonably priced. Okay. Any questions?